What happens when a seasoned television host decides she's had enough of carefully crafted narratives and polished PR responses? What happens when years of media training collide with raw, unfiltered truth? Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, a confrontation so intense it ended with the guest being asked to leave the studio. This is the story of how Tamron Hall completely dismantled Meghan Markle on live television, exposing contradictions and inconsistencies that left viewers stunned and the former royals scrambling for answers. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities who change their stories. Now, let's dive in. The atmosphere in Studio 6A was electric as Tamron Hall adjusted her notes one last time. Across from her, Meghan Markle sat poised in her carefully chosen cream-colored blazer, her media training evident in every calculated gesture. The interview was supposed to be a softball promotional segment for Meghan's latest charitable initiative, but Tamron had other plans. "Meghan, thank you for being here today," Tamron began, her voice warm but carrying an undertone that suggested this wouldn't be the typical celebrity puff piece. "I want to start by talking about your recent comments regarding privacy and the media. You have spoken extensively about wanting to protect your family from intrusive coverage." Meghan nodded, slipping into her rehearsed response mode. "Absolutely, Tamron. Privacy is fundamental to any family, and when you have children, that becomes even more important. We have always tried to maintain boundaries while still engaging with causes that matter to us." Tamron leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts kicking in. "That's interesting because I've been looking at your recent activities and I'm curious about something. You've spoken about wanting privacy, yet you've also signed deals with major streaming platforms, participated in high-profile interviews, and maintained a very public presence through your various ventures. How do you reconcile wanting privacy while simultaneously courting publicity?" The question hung in the air, like a challenge. Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment before she recovered. "While I think there's a difference between controlling your own narrative and having your story told for you. When we engage with media on our own terms, it allows us to share what we want to share while protecting what should remain private." "But Meghan," Tamron pressed, her tone becoming more pointed, "that sounds like you want it both ways. You want the benefits of media attention when it serves your purposes, but you criticize the same media when the coverage is not to your liking. Don't you think that's somewhat hypocritical?" Meghan's posture stiffened, and for the first time, genuine irritation flashed across her face. "I wouldn't call it hypocritical, Tamron. I'd call it being strategic about protecting my family while still using my platform for good." "Strategic," Tamron repeated, letting the word hang. "Between them, let's talk about strategy then. Your approach to media relations has been quite calculated, hasn't it? The timing of certain revelations, the choice of friendly interviewers, the selective sharing of personal details. It all seems very orchestrated. Every public figure has to be thoughtful about how they engage with media," Meghan replied, her voice becoming slightly defensive. "That's not manipulation. That's just being smart about communication." Tamron shuffled her papers deliberately, a move that television veterans know often signals a shift to more serious territory. "Speaking of communication, I want to address some inconsistencies I've noticed in your various interviews over the years. You've given different versions of certain events, and I think our viewers deserve some clarity." Meghan's eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you mean by different versions. I've always been truthful about my experiences. Have you, though?" Tamron's question was delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "Because I've done my homework, Meghan, and there are some discrepancies that I think need to be addressed. For instance, your timeline regarding certain conversations and events has shifted depending on the interview and the interviewer." The studio seemed to grow quieter, as if even the camera operators sensed the tension building between the two women. Meghan shifted in her chair, her media training battling with her growing discomfort. "Tamron, I think you might be misremembering, or perhaps taking things out of context," Meghan said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "Memory can be subjective, especially when dealing with emotional or traumatic experiences." Tamron was not buying it. "Memory can indeed be subjective, but facts are facts. And the facts, Meghan, tell a different story than some of your recollections. Would you like me to be specific?" "I would appreciate you being specific, because I stand by everything I have said," Meghan replied, though her voice carried less conviction than her words suggested. Tamron reached for a folder beside her chair. The movement was deliberate and theatrical. She knew how to build drama, how to create moments that would keep viewers glued to their screens. "Let's start with your claims about being unprepared for royal life. In multiple interviews you have stated that no one explained the protocols to you, that you were thrown into the deep end without guidance." "That is correct," Meghan affirmed, seeming relieved to be on familiar talking points. "But that contradicts information from palace sources and even some of your own previous statements," Tamron continued. There are records of extensive briefings, protocol training sessions, and preparation meetings. How do you explain that discrepancy? Meghan's composure began to crack slightly. Palace sources are not always reliable. They have their own agenda, and they weren't in the room for every conversation I had or didn't have. Fair enough, Tamron conceded, but what about your own words? In an earlier interview, you mentioned receiving guidance and training, yet later you claimed you received none. Which version is accurate? The question was a direct hit, and Meghan felt it. She paused, clearly calculating her response. I think there might be some confusion about the timeline or the context of those statements. Or there might be some confusion about the truth. Tamron shot back, her journalistic instincts now in full control. Meghan, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can spot inconsistencies. The question is whether you're going to acknowledge them or continue to deflect. Meghan's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. Not deflecting anything, Tamron. I'm trying to provide context that you seem determined to ignore. Context is important, Tamron agreed. But so is consistency. And frankly, Meghan, your story keeps changing depending on who's asking the questions and what narrative you're trying to support at the time. The accusation hit its mark, and Meghan's response revealed the frustration that had been building throughout the interview. That is absolutely unfair. And frankly, I didn't come here to be attacked. You're not being attacked, Tamron replied calmly. You're being asked legitimate questions that any journalist worth their salt would ask. The fact that you're interpreting accountability as an attack tells me everything I need to know about how you handle scrutiny. Meghan stood up partially in her chair, her composure finally breaking. I've handled plenty of scrutiny, more than most people could manage. What I haven't signed up for is having my words twisted and my experiences minimized by someone who wasn't there. Sit down, Meghan, Tamron said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had controlled countless interviews over her career. We're not done here. Meghan reluctantly settled back into her chair, but her body language screamed defiance. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the armrests, and her jaw was set in a way that suggested she was barely containing her anger. Tamron, meanwhile, looked completely in her element, like a predator who had just cornered her prey. Good, Tamron said, her tone deceptively calm. Now, let's continue our conversation about consistency. I want to talk about your relationship with your father. You've painted very different pictures of that relationship depending on the audience and the timing. Meghan's eyes flashed. With something dangerous, my relationship with my father is personal and complicated, and I don't appreciate having it dissected for entertainment. This isn't entertainment, Meghan. This is journalism, Tamron replied sharply. And when you make your personal relationships part of your public narrative, when you use them to generate sympathy and support, they become fair game. For examination, I have never used my family for sympathy, Meghan protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Tamron opened her folder and pulled out what appeared to be printed transcripts. Really? Because I have quotes here from multiple interviews where you specifically discuss your father's behavior, your family dynamics, and how they affected you. You've used these stories to explain your decisions, to justify your actions, and to garner public support. How is that not using your family for sympathy? Meghan shifted uncomfortably, realizing she had walked into a trap. Discussing my experiences is not the same as exploiting them. When people ask me direct questions about my life, I answer honestly. Honestly. Tamron's eyebrows raised in theatrical disbelief. Let's test that theory. In one interview, you described your father as loving, but flawed someone who made mistakes but ultimately cared about you. In another interview, you painted him as manipulative and unreliable, someone who betrayed your trust repeatedly. Which version is the honest one? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find an answer that wouldn't contradict one of her previous statements. People are complex, Tamron, she finally said. My feelings about my father have evolved. As I've learned more about his actions and their impact on my life, evolved or been crafted to fit whatever narrative you needed at the time. Tamron pressed. Because from where I sit, it looks like you adjust your family story based on what will generate the most sympathy for whatever project or cause you're promoting. Meghan's composure cracked further. That is a terrible accusation to make about someone's relationship with their parent. You have no idea what I've been through or how complicated these relationships can be. You're right. I don't know what you've been through, Tamron acknowledged. But I do know what you've said publicly, and what you've said publicly keeps changing. That's not complexity, Meghan, that's manipulation. The word hit like a physical blow. Meghan's face flushed, and for a moment, she looked genuinely stunned. I can't believe you just called me manipulative on national television. I didn't call you manipulative, Tamron corrected. I said your inconsistent storytelling looks like manipulation. There's a difference though. I'm starting to wonder if you see it that way. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward slightly. I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination disguised as journalism. Sit down, Meghan, Tamron commanded again, her voice carrying even more authority than before. You agreed to this interview, and we're going to finish it properly. Running away when faced with difficult questions is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people question your credibility. I'm not running away, Meghan snapped, though she remained standing. I'm refusing to participate in what has clearly become a hit piece. Tamron leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. A hit piece. Meghan, I've asked you exactly 3 substantive questions about statements you made publicly. If you consider basic fact to be a hit piece, then maybe the problem isn't with my questions, but with your answers. Your questions are loaded and designed to make me look bad, Meghan accused, her voice rising slightly. My questions are designed to get to the truth, Tamron shot back. If the truth makes you look bad, then perhaps you should reconsider some of the things you have said publicly. Meghan finally sat back down, but her posture remained rigid and defensive. Fine. What exactly do you want from me, Tamron? I want honesty, Tamron replied simply. I want you to acknowledge that your story has changed multiple times. Explain. Why? I want you to take responsibility for the inconsistencies instead of deflecting and making excuses. I've been honest about my experiences, Meghan insisted, though her voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Have you? Though Tamron pulled out another document from her folder. Let's talk about your claims regarding financial support from the royal family. You've given conflicting accounts of whether you received funding, how much you received, and what it was used for. Can you explain these discrepancies? Meghan's face went pale. This was clearly territory she had hoped to avoid. Financial arrangements within the royal family are private and complex. It's not as simple as you're making it sound. I'm not making it sound simple, Tamron replied. I'm pointing out that you've given different versions of the same events. In one interview, you suggested you were cut off financially and left to fend for yourselves. In another, you acknowledged receiving substantial support. Which version is accurate? Meghan was clearly struggling now. Her media training was clashing with her instinct to defend herself. Both can be true, depending on the time frame and the specific circumstances. No, Meghan, both cannot be true, Tamron said firmly. You either received financial support or you did not. You were either cut off or you weren't. You can't have it both ways just because it makes for a better story. You're oversimplifying a very complex situation. Meghan protested weakly. I'm holding you accountable for your public statements, Tamron corrected. Something that apparently hasn't happened enough in your previous interviews. The comment stung. Meghan's reaction showed it. I've been held accountable. Plenty. I've been scrutinized and criticized more than any public figure in recent memory. Scrutinized, yes, Tamron agreed, but held accountable. That's debatable. Most of your interviews have been with friendly hosts asking softball questions, letting you control the narrative. This might be the first time someone's actually challenged your version of events. Meghan's eyes blazed with anger. So, this is some kind of gotcha journalism, an attempt to boost your ratings by ambushing me? Tamron's response was swift and sharp. Meghan, if asking you to explain your own words is an ambush, then you have bigger problems than inconsistent storytelling. This is basic journalism, the kind that used to be standard before celebrity culture made everyone afraid to ask hard questions. I didn't sign up for this, Meghan said, her voice now carrying a note of desperation. You signed up for a television interview, Tamron replied coldly. What you expected, apparently, was a promotional platform. Talking points without challenge. Unfortunately for you, that's not how real journalism works. Meghan looked around the studio, as if searching for a way out or someone to intervene. When no help came, she turned back to Tamron, her hostility barely hidden. Are we almost done here? She asked through gritted teeth. Tamron smiled and it wasn't a pleasant one. Oh Meghan, we're just getting started. I've barely scratched the surface of the inconsistencies in your public statements. We still need to discuss your claims about racism, your timeline of conversations, and your descriptions of your relationships with other family members. The color drained from Meghan's face as she realized the questioning was far from over. She took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control over a situation that had spiraled well beyond what she expected. Her hands were trembling slightly now, though she tried to mask it by clasping them in her lap. Tamron, I think we need to take a step back here, Meghan said, trying to sound reasonable despite the panic in her eyes. This has become unnecessarily hostile, and I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish. Tamron was unmoved. What I'm trying to accomplish is getting straight answers to straightforward questions, something you seem incapable of providing. Let's continue with your claims about racism within the royal family. I would prefer not to revisit that topic, Meghan said quickly, aware of how dangerous this line of questioning could be. I'm sure you would prefer not to, Tamron replied with a cold smile, but you made those claims publicly. They had serious consequences for real people and, now you need to stand behind them. You alleged that there were concerns and conversations about your son's skin color. Can you be specific about who said what and when? Meghan's composure cracked visibly. I've already addressed this in previous interviews. I don't need to rehash every detail. Actually, you do, Tamron insisted, because your previous answers have been vague and evasive and, frankly, accusations of racism deserve specificity. If you're going to damage reputations, you need to provide evidence. I never intended to destroy anyone's reputation, Meghan protested weakly. But that's exactly what happened, isn't it? Tamron pressed. You made explosive allegations. Let the media and public speculate wildly about who might have made those comments, and then stepped back while an entire institution was labeled as racist. Do you take any responsibility for that? Meghan shifted, uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this level of accountability. I shared my truth about conversations that happened. I can't control how people interpret or respond to that information. Your truth, Tamron repeated, her voice heavy with skepticism. There it is, again that phrase you use whenever you want to avoid taking responsibility for the impact of your words. She leaned forward. But here's the thing about truth, Meghan, not subjective. Either these conversations happened as you described them, or they did not. Of course, they happened. Meghan snapped, her frustration finally boiling over. Do you think I would make something like that up? Tamron leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Based on the pattern of inconsistencies we've already discussed, I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. You've changed your story so many times about so many things, your credibility is essentially zero. The words landed like a slap. Meghan's mouth fell open in shock. For a moment, she seemed genuinely speechless. I can't believe you just said that, she finally whispered. I can't believe I had to. Tamron replied flatly. But here we are. You've spent years crafting different versions of events depending on your audience and your agenda. And now, when faced with basic journalistic scrutiny, you're falling apart. Meghan stood again, this time with purpose. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly never intended to conduct a fair interview. Fair? Tamron's voice rose for the first time. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair to make serious allegations without providing specifics? Is it fair to change your story whenever it suits you? Is it fair to destroy reputations while hiding behind vague language and emotional manipulation? I have never manipulated anyone, Meghan shouted, her composure now fully shattered. Everything you do is manipulation. Tamron shot back, standing to meet Meghan's energy. The way you phrase your answers, the timing of your reveals, the way you play the victim the second anyone asks a real question. It's all calculated and, frankly, it's insulting to anyone paying attention. Meghan's face flushed with anger and humiliation. I came here in good faith to talk about my charitable work, and instead, I've walked into a character assassination disguised as journalism. You came here expecting another puff piece, Tamron said, one where you recite your talking points without challenge. What you got was journalism, something you clearly haven't encountered in quite some time. This isn't journalism, Meghan spat. This is a hit job. And I'm done. She turned toward the edge of the set, clearly intending to leave. But Tamron wasn't finished. Running away again, Tamron called after her. Is that your answer to everything? When the questions get tough, when someone dares ask for specifics, when your narrative starts to fall apart, you just walk away. Meghan spun around, her eyes blazing. I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from a toxic situation that serves no constructive purpose. The only thing toxic here is your relationship with the truth. Tamron fired back. You've built a public persona on stories that keep changing, and the moment someone holds you to account, you play the victim. It's pathetic. The studio went silent except for the quiet hum of the cameras. Meghan stood frozen, torn between her impulse to leave and the pressure to defend herself. The tension in the air was electric. You know what, Tamron, Meghan said finally, her voice low and sharp. You think you're some truth teller, some hero of journalism, but all you're doing is tearing down someone who's already been through enough, someone who's faced more scrutiny and criticism than you can imagine. Tamron didn't flinch, playing the victim again. Tell me, Meghan, do you ever take responsibility for anything? Ever consider that maybe, just maybe, some of the criticism is valid? I have taken plenty of responsibility, Meghan insisted, though her voice lacked strength. When Tamron pressed, when have you ever admitted you were wrong? When have you ever acknowledged that your version of events might not be entirely accurate? Meghan started, then stopped. She couldn't think of an example. Exactly, Tamron said with satisfaction. You talk about responsibility, but you've never taken any. Every mistake is someone else's fault. Every criticism is unfair. Every challenge is an attack. It's exhausting. I don't have to listen to this anymore, Meghan said, her voice cracking. She looked around the studio, desperate, as if waiting for someone to intervene. Tamron made the decision for her. You're absolutely right. You don't have to listen to this anymore, Tamron said sharply, and frankly, neither do my viewers. This interview is over. She turned smoothly toward the camera, her professionalism snapping back into place like a switch had been flipped. When we return, we'll be talking about something far more enjoyable. Stay with us. Meghan stood frozen, stunned by the abrupt dismissal. "You can't just end the interview like that." "I can, and I am," Tamron replied with steely calm. "Security will escort you out." "Thank you for your time, Meghan. Truly enlightening." From the corner of the set, studio security appeared. Meghan's shock gave way to fury. "This is outrageous. You invite me here just to humiliate me, and now you're having me removed like I've done something wrong." "I invited you to answer for your public statements," Tamron said, unmoved. "The embarrassment you feel, that's on you. You could have been honest. Instead, you deflected, denied, and leaned on victimhood. This is the consequence." Meghan glanced around the studio one last time, perhaps hoping anyone might intervene. But the crew stood quietly, watching without expression as security guided her away. "This will not be forgotten," Meghan snapped as she neared the exit. "I sincerely hope not," Tamron replied coolly. "Maybe next time, you'll understand that journalists aren't your PR team." As Meghan disappeared, offset Tamron calmly adjusted her blazer and sat back down, entirely composed. Then, looking into the lens with the ease of a seasoned pro, she smiled. "We'll be right back with more of the Tamron Hall Show," she said smoothly, as if nothing explosive had just unfolded. The cameras cut. The studio buzzed with the quiet electricity of a moment no one would soon forget. Everyone there knew they had witnessed something rare, something that would be replayed, dissected, and debated for years to come. What began as a standard promotional appearance had transformed into a live demonstration of what happens when polished media narratives collide with tough, unapologetic journalism and collapse under the weight. Because sometimes, when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling, spin isn't enough. And if you found that compelling, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Do you think celebrities should be held to the same standard as everyone else when it comes to the truth?